Hey, good morning. It is bright and early Monday morning for the Pacific Coast. You Easterners is more afternoon and stuff. But hey, welcome to Caffeine Corner. I got the lovely Chess here. Look at she got dolled up for this, man.
Hello.
She's hyping this stuff. She's working it and stuff. Oh, I got to turn off my audio there. Okay. So, anyways, hi, Jess.
I'm a dancing queen today.
Are you young and sweet? Only 17?
Yeah.
You know, I wrote you a song with that, by the way. I actually did those lyrics. I gave it to Dick Dawson, but he hasn't utilized it yet.
I mean, I can't wait. I hope he does.
Yeah, so we'll see what
happens
there.
And it's actually fantastic.
Thank you. Hey, I told people that I could actually write some parody lyrics, some satire, and I did. So we'll see if Dick Dawson does anything with it, because he did a brilliant job on the last one he did. But anyways,
I think that there might be a couple of the shills in the chat, and those shills in the chat might be able to remind
they might be able to work on that. We'll see.
You can work on some.
We were just on the shills the other day, man. In fact, correct me if I'm wrong, but our wonderful God producer actually produces for the shills. Yes. God, you there?
God?
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
We thought God abandoned us for a minute there.
Right? I thought God had forsaken me. By the way, he also produces the Pimp Mug show this morning, which, by the way, I actually watched most of that. So I like his new format. I like Pimp's new format. But you guys didn't come for that. So just recently, before I even start throwing these out there, after this episode's over of Caffeine Corner, Red's Rhetoric on his channel has a major announcement.
Like a huge announcement, like maybe like this
huge.
Long. And maybe like about this round.
We're talking, yeah, we're talking big.
It's got some girth.
Metric girth. I mean, we're talking like several meters. So we're going to be heading over there after this. So we're going to keep this down as short as possible, which is going to be like 8 hours. No, just kidding. Maybe 90 minutes or 2 hours. But yeah, so Red's Rhetoric is going to be preparing for a huge announcement. You guys won't want to miss it. It's great. It's really great. But anyways, what this episode's about, we usually don't do this kind of stuff on Caffeine Corner, but the reason we're doing this on Caffeine Corner is because we're going to do it twofold, because Cheshire had a brilliant idea. I know, right? Unusual. But she's a lot smarter than people think she is, I think.
I think people underestimate me.
People underestimate her, right? So she had a great idea. She's like, hey, why don't we talk about this and have people call in and try to change my mind, or at least present me their arguments in real time, because people loved Sam wrong, but never actually provide any logical or reasonable argumentation as to why, or citational or anything. And then later on, we'll do a philosophical episode with a philosopher and actually go over the blog that I wrote on this particular topic, which is in the video description. The blog is quite long, but the too long didn't read version is basically in the description.
Yeah, there's so many people who regularly tell Steve, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, but they can never articulate what exactly it is that he's wrong about. So we're kind of giving people an opportunity to come in and tell us exactly why they think Steve is wrong, and then have that discussion. I'm essentially going to be working with whoever is calling in, because I also want to prove Steve wrong any chance I get. Chance I get. So
people don't know how much she really hates me. She's like, God damn it, Steve! You will be wrong on everything from now on in perpetuity.
In perpetuity. So essentially, how this is a little bit going to work is you're going to present whatever you're trying to present. I'm going to try and help you articulate what you think if you're struggling trying to articulate your argument. I'm going to help you structure your argument, and then Steve is going to rip it to shreds.
Yeah, she's basically the whisperer, the argument whisperer. Now, well, so
I'm here to help you, the viewers.
She's a helper. She's a helper. So
I'm here to help you, the people who want to tell Steve he's a full of shit dickhead. Hey, what up? It's me, your boy. I'm here to help.
They're going to need some help. Because I'm actually doing debate on this subject on Modern Day Debate on April 19th with Snake Was Right. I wanted the title to be is atheism or theism a metaphysical necessity, is being one or the other a metaphysical necessity, which I think is a great topic. But Snake thinks I'm wrong on everything. But I wanted to limit it on that if we could, but we'll see. He hasn't responded if that's going to be the debate topic. But I will be having a debate with Snake Was Right on Modern Day Debate on this very topic. So this is pertinent to this week about why I'm I hold the position that there's no metaphysical necessity that you must be atheist or theist. According to Matt Dillahunty, that doesn't seem to be the case. But I argue in my blog why Matt Dillahunty I think is incorrect in this modality-wise. Why that I think he has a modal scope error, and that you're going to have to convince me that it must be the case, metaphysically speaking, probably from first principles of logic, that you have to be either theist or atheist. And why am I disappearing? This is. Do you notice this? I'm evaporating, Chesh.
I've noticed a couple of things, particularly on Twitter, one of the more recent ones, and it's somebody that we talk to on a regular basis, so we know they're not a troll, who was making your argument back to you and then saying, "But I'm using this term." The issue is that you were using it philosophically. They then used it philosophically and then said, yeah, except I'm using this one word differently, even though I'm speaking in logical terms. So they were still using B or P equals, they were using the logical maths, the logical format, and then saying that repeating the exact same thing back to you, but changing one word. And they're like, you can't just be in the middle of an argument and flip the way you're using words. It's the same way, it's the exact same thing that pastors do or apologists do in Christianity when they flip the word faith halfway through a discussion.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Define faith, and they define faith as, when you have trust in something, when you believe something because it kind of makes sense to, and then flip that on to God when it's, you're using two different kinds of faith and you're switching between the two, and you can't do that. Absolutely. And it's the same thing that applies with atheism or to not believe in gods. You can't just say, well, I think to not believe in gods, but then I'm going to use atheist as a more umbrella term halfway through the discussion.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And
it's about consistency.
This argument has really no relevancy to definitions. This makes no difference. This has to do with modalities. No. This has to do with modal scopes. It has to do with Matt.
Yeah, who was that guy you had on the other day?
Who?
You had that radio guy on the other day, and he got mad at you.
Oh God!
I was because he didn't understand that. Okay, tell me if I'm wrong about this, but the way I was watching that, I was like, he's getting caught up on the definitions and not the error. You could literally call it cat and dog, and the error would still be there. It doesn't matter what words you use.
Right.
And he got mad, and I was just what is this guy's?
His name was Larry Rose.
I was sitting there watching it, and I was like, this is why I left radio. This is why I didn't do radio as a job. This shit.
Larry Rose is the atheist radio host for Digital Free Thought blogs, and he wasn't understanding the arguments. They keep on defaulting back to just definitional semantic stuff. This has nothing to do with semantics. This just straight up has to do with modal logic, and it has to do with what's called metaphysical necessities, right? And Matt Dillahunty a few years ago, and I just had this discovered. This is why I hadn't seen it specifically. I hadn't even asked, where has Matt Dillahunty said that it's impossible to be neither theist or atheist? I didn't hear him ever say that. But then Wrecked Instance, if you guys know who he is, had actually shown me the video, and I put it on my Facebook page somewhere. Matt Dillahunty actually saying that. He's quoted as saying that he basically says, everybody who calls in this show for the Atheist Experience, the caller asks them, are you atheist or theist? They put you in that I'm going to say false dichotomy. And he said, Rex said, well, I'm neither, right? And Matt Dillahunty basically said, well, that is an impossibility, right? He said the caller, he said he was confused. He says, I'm confused, basically what he means by that, because you must be one or the other. Now, that when you say you must be something, that it presents a whole different challenge than just using some stipulative definitions that Matt uses that are atypical in philosophy. Okay, he's welcome to do that. But when you say somebody must be something, it must be the case, and it's impossible to be otherwise, that is implying a metaphysical necessity. So I want people to try to explain to me why they think atheism and theism is a metaphysical necessity from first principles, from logical verities. I've shown in my blog, I think pretty convincingly, that's not the case, right?
Well, it's a matter of making the claim that this is the way it is. Now explain to me why it's this way and demonstrate that that is actually the case. So you can't just say that, oh, well, it's a dichotomy. It's either this or this. You have to demonstrate that it is, in fact, a dichotomy. Why can there not be a third option? Because there's very few things are actually dichotomies.
I mean, I'll concede for arguendo's sake. Well, I hate saying for arguendo, it's just arguendo. I'll concede arguendo that given certain definitions, there's a dichotomy to be there, but it's not a metaphysical one. It's not by necessity in all possible worlds this must be the case. It's just because it's just arbitrary and stipulative usages, right? You're just semantically saying this means this. That's not by first principles. That is a semantic argument at that point. I don't care about that, right?
Well, yeah, if you define it into it's the argument you've defined it into the definition. So
right. If I say
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish, please.
As I say, if you define it into existence, how can you say that theists are wrong for defining God into existence?
Right. Yeah. Same thing. I mean, if I say you're either theist or dog, not theist, therefore dog, sure, that's logically valid. Okay, great. Where does that get us? Mm-hmm. That's a semantic thing, right? Because I'm just saying these are your two options. If you don't choose one, you got to choose the other. Okay. But
so here's somebody in the chat.
Scope, right?
Yeah, so somebody in the chat, we've got Dugans in here, and he's saying, are you either a cat or not a cat? Saying I'm not a cat doesn't tell you what I am. That's the problem. You can literally be anything and not a cat.
Well, let's have them actually come in, because I can respond to the live chat, and we do that all the time. That's fine. But I'd rather have people in real time trying to have these discussions, because I have seen the same misunderstandings repeatedly from people on this particular topic. Repeatedly, and I don't think they even fully understand the modal argument to be had, right? Because when Matt Dillahunty says you must be one or the other, he seems to, when he says it's not possible, that changes the scope. He's trying to make it as a metaphysical necessity that's no possible anybody. I'm neither theist or atheist. I exist, right? So one defeater defeats the proposition. If the proposition is you can neither be, it is not possible to be neither theist or atheist, that statement's false. I'm neither. I know a lot of people's neither. Rick instance is neither. That's why, and when he called into the show, the Atheist Experience, he said, I'm neither. So Matt's fundamentally wrong on that. And in order to prove his position, he has to show logically that is by necessity that you must be one or the other, not by relative necessity. And what he is doing is just a relative necessity. It's not a metaphysical one. And that is a huge distinction to be made. That's called a modal scope fallacy. So do you want to just kind of like throw the thing out there and see who calls in first?
Yeah, well, we should see if we get a caller, but I think some people are a little bit confused about what the actual question is and what the contention is. The contention essentially comes down to somebody saying that you are either this or this. You can't be neither of these things. You have to be one or the other. So the contention is can you show us how that is the case? Can you please demonstrate by first principles how this is actually even a dichotomy to begin with?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'll grant arguendo that it's a dichotomy if I say, look, hey, Chess, do you want fish or chicken for dinner? And you say, well, I don't want chicken. All right, then you get fish. Okay, there's a dichotomy to be had there. But is it a metaphysical necessity that you must have chicken or fish? No, there's billions of other foods you can eat, clearly. So that's not a metaphysical necessity.
It's kind of the question is malformed at that point. If you say, are you a cat or are you not a cat? Well, you're not really asking the proper question. The question should be, what are you?
Yeah, I mean, theist
because
and not
there's
theist
lots
is a
of
dichotomy.
other. Not cat is such a huge umbrella term that it actually tells you nothing about me except for the fact that I am not a cat.
Cat and not cat, right? I mean, either something is a cat or it's not a cat. That's a dichotomy, right? I can formulate that from first principles, right? But when you start changing, I'm going to say this word means this, you're no longer doing logic. You're doing semantics.
Or if you say it's not possible for you to either be a cat, you can't be anything but a cat, then it doesn't work.
And somebody's like talking about by definition. I have dozens of definitions that show that's not the case. I mean, let's not play a definition fallacy game, right? Argumentum ad dictionarium. That's not, I have no interest in that. This is about logic. This is about modal logic. And this is about, can you be one or the other? The answer is yes, you can be neither. Okay. You don't have to be atheist or theist. There's no metaphysical necessity for that. It is not logically provable in any way, shape, or form.
It's like saying that you're either a tiger or you're not a cat. Well, I could be a different kind of cat. That would be a more accurate analogy.
Yeah.
Right. So I could be a cat and also not a tiger.
First principles are basically the logical verities, right? Law of non-contradiction, law of excluded middle, law of identity. These are logical verities that all classical logic are predicated upon, and also modal logic has some interesting things, but possible world theory is predicated on classical logic. right? And modal. So if I say that something is impossible, what that means is it cannot exist in any possible world, right? If I say that a four-sided triangle is impossible, that means that it cannot exist in any possible world. If I say A does not equal A, that's impossible. In all possible worlds, it cannot exist. Right?
We have
that's
a caller.
What these terms are used. Awesome.
We have a
All right,
caller.
what do we got?
TD Lane.
Name.
Hello, I am TD Lane.
Hello!
I would like to say, would
You don't
another
disagree with me,
analogy
you
that
don't
would
count.
work here is saying you're either left or you're right.
Sure. Yeah, because you could go straight.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, these are
yeah,
left and
no,
right
I
are
would say that would
contraries.
work.
Yeah, I mean left. These are called contraries. Good
East
and evil
or
are
west might be
contraries.
better. East or west might be
Yeah.
better because then they're actually opposite of each other. Because left or right doesn't have to be.
A contrary is something that are both one has to be true, the other has to be false. They both cannot be true, but they both can be false, right? Judaism and Christianity are contraries, right? They both can't be true
Right.
at the same time, but they both can be false. And if Christianity is true, Judaism is false, and vice versa. But theism and atheism in academia is considered more to be what's called contradictories, meaning that if one is true, the other's false. Both can't be true, and both neither can be false because it's contingent upon God's existence.
Right. So if you're going east, you can't go west.
Yeah.
But there's
If
no
you're-
ontological necessity. You have to go one way or the other, right? You can't go straight, right? It's not metaphysical.
You could
necessity.
also not
You must
move.
go left or right, or not.
You could
move,
just
right,
not
yeah,
move.
sure. Yeah. I called it. What do you got, TD Lane?
All right. Yeah, it's like, okay, so you have two positions, but there can't be a middle ground position, or there can't be a different position you can have. Why
Well,
is there a dichotomy here?
There's a dichotomy between. Okay, if you start with first principles, right? The law of exclude middle. Okay, well, actually, the law of non-contradiction. You can start with that. Not P or not parentheses P or not P, right? So you can derive off the law of non-contradiction, the law of excluded middle, and other things. You can say, okay, P or not P, A or not A. Let's instantiate that. You get theist or not theist. Thus derivable, right? I can say, okay, you're the theist or not theist. You're a cat or not a cat. Whatever you want sticking for A, you add not next to it. There, you get a dichotomy, right? Right? But there's no middle ground between that, right? Either it is the case or not the case. You believe or you don't believe. That's no middle ground about that, right? But there's no argument to be had there. Nobody's arguing there's middle ground between you believe and you don't believe. I've never heard anybody besides atheists, for some reason, sometimes misunderstand and they argue that. But really, nobody in the world would ever argue there's middle ground in classical logic between I believe and I don't believe. That is a dichotomy there, right? What they do is they artificially assign not belief to mean a certain word, but that's not the case. I mean, that's
Sure,
just
and I would probably
arbitrary,
make
semantic.
and I would probably make the argument that they expand a definition so far that it doesn't actually tell you anything about somebody. So, like we said before, if you're saying you believe something or you do not believe something, you throw not in there, it doesn't tell somebody what you actually believe. If I say I not believe this,
Right.
So if I say, like I said, if I tell you I'm either a cat or not a cat, if I tell you I'm not a cat, that doesn't tell you what I am. It just tells you that I'm not a cat. But that doesn't make me not a feline necessarily. I could still be some sort of cat that I'm not choosing to define as a cat. I don't think the cat analogy also works because it's too broad of a cat is too broad. So if you were to say specify house cat and I say I'm a cat but I'm also not a house cat, that would be more, and that analogy I think is more accurate.
Yeah.
Well,
and the middle ground, real quick, the middle ground is not between I believe and I don't believe. The middle ground is I believe P, or between that and I believe not P, right? So in academia, and by the way, this is objective. This is nothing, this is my opinion, right? This is something you can actually go read about, right? And most atheists, I don't know why they don't go read about this stuff. I asked them if they read anything, they go, no. They just listen to some YouTube channel, go, okay, then they must be right. I say, go check my work, right? And so the middle ground is between believes P and believes not P, right? So in academia, theist believes P, the atheist believes not P. That's pretty well normative. That's backed up by Oxford, Cambridge, Stanford, and I have about 2 dozen papers that actually will agree with that, right? I've never found an atheist has produced any citation from any academic source that in any way shows that to be incorrect. Not one, ever. So let's assume that to be the case. So the middle ground, when people say you don't have to be atheist or theist, they're talking about theist being somebody who believes that God exists and atheist believing gods do not exist. Now, if you want to change those to some sensu lato definitions, right, as Matt Dillahunty does, he's more than welcome to do that. Right? I mean, there's baggage that goes along with that, and I have multiple arguments showing why there's some issues with that. It leads to contradictions or logical.
Well, yeah, you're running into the problem of redefining something to fit a dichotomy that isn't even a proper dichotomy. We're adjusting the term atheist. Yeah, so we're adjusting the term atheism to mean to just not believe something when that's not where atheism stands in philosophy. Because in philosophy, it's not a dichotomy between to believe something or to not believe something. It's a dichotomy between I believe this and I don't believe this. So I don't believe in a God is different from I don't believe there are gods is different from something along the lines of the more agnostic position, which is what they're more akin to. But in philosophical terms, from what I've heard Matt describe of his own personal what he thinks he believes or what he claims, he's more of an agnostic than an atheist.
I don't think so.
I have yet to be convinced.
No, he has earlier stuff. He says all gods are BS. I've heard him say something along those lines.
Well, but here's the thing, when he's arguing, he argues from the position of you have to convince me. From that position, he's taking an agnostic position of saying, I have yet to be convinced, so you need to convince me. If he has yet to be convinced, he's not arguing from the position of atheism. He's not arguing from the position of, I don't believe in gods. Yeah, he's arguing from the position of, I don't know. Essentially.
Schiff says, congrats on the court order. Thank you. We're gonna be talking about that eventually. Schiff says, only in philosophy, atheism is polysemous, though. Yes, it is. Now, here's the thing what people have to remember. This is not me redefining anything. This is ubiquitous in philosophy for the last 400 years, maybe 300. Okay, this was Flu's argument against this. Flu's argument that he wanted to redefine the words. In 1972, he wrote a paper called The Presumption of Atheism, where he admits atheism is the position gods don't exist. That's standard in philosophy. He acknowledged that in his paper, right? After Anthony Flew, he says, it is commonly held that atheism is the belief that God does not exist, but he wants to change it into the negative, right? So he was actually arguing in that paper. He wants to redefine it to mean something else. I'm not redefining anything. This has been standard for 400 freaking years. Go look at the literature, right? So, but again, you don't have to accept that. I don't care whether you accept it or not. My argument is that it's not a metaphysical necessity. And I want to have somebody come in and argue the logic here and the reasoning. But TD, let me get you back to you in a second. Helios, $5. There are three positions here. One positive, one non-positive, and a negation positive. Positive equals theism, non-positive equals agnostic, and negation equals atheist. Yes, that's generally how it's held. There's three epistemic dispositions for any proposition. Believes, disbelieves, suspend judgment.
Yeah, and the issue with the argument is it's trying to... Yeah, and the issue is that this argument is trying to lump two of those positions together to equal one position, and it alienates people.
Yeah. So TD, what else you got for us? Because I get somebody here who disagrees with me. I know you don't.
I gotta say, every time I come in here, I learn something new. That's about all I had.
That's the goal.
You can actually have some people that disagree with you come in, hopefully. But
say it hashtag Steve isn't wrong.
Come in. Oh no, Steve's wrong in everything because he's wrong in everything.
There you go.
Obviously.
Close enough. Thanks, bud. I'll put the.
You might want to put the link back in the chat again, by the way, because I saw somebody. Yeah. Have a good one.
So again, I challenge people, and again, this has nothing to do with what we're talking now, but go read the literature. Every paper you're going to read uses atheism in the positive case. I've never found one that doesn't, I don't think. I've had two maybe advocate for it, maybe three if you count Martin's, but Martin's kind of wishy-washy on it. So Dr. Michael Martin, Dr. Stephen Bullivant, who's by the way a theist, and Dr. Anthony Flew, but even he admits that in philosophy, the normative understanding of atheism is the belief that God does not exist. If you don't like that, who cares? That's a fact. That's an objective fact you can go verify. I don't care if you accept the uses of that. That's up to you. Dillahunty can accept a different usage. That's never been my argument.
I
don't care if he says
two people here now. So we got Ilya Moon and Mark Ryken.
Okay, so give me 1 second. Let me finish this line of thought. I don't care if Matt uses terminology differently. What I see happening is Matt's applying that his usages across the board universally to all people. That I think is intellectually dishonest, and I know people have called him out on that before. Shift says for $2, how does agnostic differ from weak atheist logically? It doesn't. In fact, weak atheist, agnostic, and weak theism, I approve logically in my blog, are logically the same position, but there are epistemic differences. But logically, I actually prove using modus ponens there, and what's called conjunctive elimination, that they are the same. So failed engineering gave us a sticker for $1.50. Mwah. Moon, what do you got first? Because I know you agree with me. I want to get someone who doesn't. But I love you. Moon?
Hello?
Moon?
Moon.
I guess Moon's not working here. All right, who we got?
Me?
Michael? Yeah.
Hey, how you doing?
What's up, bud?
I'm working.
So I have just a quick
I was
question.
on mute. Sorry.
Okay.
Oh, I don't-
Michael, hang on one second. Let me talk to my dear friend Elliot just for a second here, but I know she agrees with me. So what do you got first, real quick, Elliot? And I can get on to Michael, who probably doesn't.
I just wanted to call in to say I absolutely agree with you, and I love you and Chesh and Bull, and happy Monday.
Yeah, I'm not even kidding. You're one of our favorite humans. We love you.
Aw,
Yes.
thank you. You guys are my
It's like you.
some of
and
my
triple
favorite people.
You know, higher frequencies. We love you guys. So.
Aw. Well, I love you guys too, and I think that this is a very interesting topic. I'm finding it very interesting to listen to, but I absolutely agree with your sentiment and your
Thank you.
your premise on this. So I just wanted to give you my support and tell you guys I love you.
And shout out to the Uncalled For on the Shills channel. Great show, love it. You guys are rocking it over there, man. I don't get entertained that often. There's a lot of shows out there. I don't watch a lot of YouTube. Matter of fact, anything dealing with my name, I don't watch because it's just tripe. But I actually sit down and listen to the Uncalled For. So there you go. So that's high praise for me because I don't really watch a lot of crap. I watch Cheshire's channel.
Thank
the
you,
Uncalled
thank
For is
you.
pretty funny.
You know, the Uncalled For is really good. So good job on that. All right, thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
All right, so
Bye.
Michael,
Hey, bud. So I wanted to
please
first
tell me you disagree
start
with
off
me.
with- Well, I know. Well, I don't. I think I'm agnostic to whether. Not to be ironic, I'm agnostic to whether I agree or not. I think.
I'm not sure whether I
think
agree
I
with you
want
or I
to
don't.
say-
Well, listen, you either agree or you don't agree. So, which
Right,
is
right.
it?
Well, I wanted to first off say
Jay,
fuck
why?
Kyle. Second off, I wanted to say, so I guess let me ask you this, and maybe this will be a better point of, maybe a better question. If it's P, and say someone's making the claim that it is P, wouldn't not P be anything else, regardless of whether it is an affirmative position or not?
Okay, so normally when you take a negation of something, the
Can
easiest way
I
to do
can
it.
I answer this real
Oh, yeah,
quick?
go ahead.
Can I do the
Sure.
short answer?
Yeah, take a
And-
shot.
and-
Go
okay.
ahead.
The short answer is either you agree with Steve or you don't agree with Steve. Which is it?
Well, I would say I don't agree with Steve,
Why?
Okay, that's good.
because
Well,
I
no,
would
no,
say
no. Well, hold on. I'll let him.
I wouldn't.
Let him-
I wouldn't say it was like to the extent in the chat. I think those examples were a little misguided, but I would say
Mhm.
that if you have the affirmative of a position, and we'll call it P, it doesn't matter what you're. If you are rejecting that position, or you don't, I'm sorry, if you don't accept that position, it still follows under the umbrella of not P. So it would still be a dichotomy. But
No,
maybe there's
So
some kind
in-
of.
So in this, it's okay. So in this example, when you came in here, you were like, "I'm not sure if I agree with you or not." Is that not a position?
So he is making the affirmative to say that it is what he is saying. I am saying I am not sure, but I still think that follows
Right.
under the negative P, as if somebody would come in here and say, I think Steve is absolutely wrong. I think that we both still fall under not P, because Steve is saying P.
Yeah,
But you're not making
I
it.
can-
But you're not making it an assertion or a claim. You're saying that you don't know yet because you haven't finished assessing the situation and you're not sure you understand.
Sure, I'm in between that, and I think it would
Yeah,
violate.
I'm following you, but I don't understand what it has to do with what I'm arguing. Right? We already said
Yeah,
you
that's
either
why-
believe logic or classical theism, non-classical theism. Let's just say God exists. Would you just this arguendo, is that fine as a proposition? God exists? Because I don't really want to get technical between
Sure,
the
yeah, I can
classical
go
logic and
with that.
non-classical. All right, so if the proposition is God exists, you would say the theist affirms that, right?
Yes.
Okay, so what's the negation of that proposition?
Not accepting that.
No. What's what is the not P? If P is God exists, what is not P? What is the negation of that proposition? Because like somebody had mentioned in the live chat earlier, they talked about A, which is called the Greek primitive, right? The Alpha Greek primitive, privative. That Greek privative is basically, that means not. It doesn't mean without in this particular context. It just means negation, as in negation of the proposition. This is supported by Stanford. This is supported by Cambridge.
Sure.
So if
Okay,
the proposition
you're saying a direct negation is what you're saying, then I would agree.
What is the direct negation? Right.
Yeah, I would agree that would be God does not exist.
Okay, right. Or it is not the case that God exists, which is ostensibly God does not exist, right? So what is if you have the belief predicate, what do you get? Believe, not P. What does that mean?
I'm sorry, I kind of didn't hear that.
If the proposition is God exists and the negation is God does not exist, and you throw in a belief predicate there, believes not P. If somebody believes not P, what does that mean? They believe God does not exist, correct?
Sure. So then what would you represent that middle ground with? If there's only P and not P, then it still seems like it's violating some law.
No. There's no middle ground between P and not P. There's middle ground between believes P and believes not P. That's where the middle ground lies.
Yeah.
Can I ask
I believe
a question regarding this?
Sure. I'm just kind of confused on why that maybe, and this is from my lack of understanding of the law of contradiction, but when I'm looking into that, it doesn't seem like there is that option.
Well,
it seems like it's either
has nothing to do with beliefs, right? Beliefs are not dichotomous. I can believe it's true. I can believe it's false. I can believe neither. I can believe both. I can believe it's irrelevant. Beliefs are not dichotomous, right?
So
that's where
it's a step. Yeah. So it's a step between. Right. So there's a step between whether or not something is true and is not true, and whether you think those things are true or not.
Sure.
And just to
right. So the contradiction, the law of contradiction applies to whether or not something is true, not whether or not you think it is true or not, or whether you believe it.
It has to do with
okay, so I get that. So that's more into the metaphysical of what you were
exactly
kind of saying.
So I sent something to
exactly.
I sent something to Bull, and maybe that can help you out there if he shows that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm not. See, that's why I called it. I'm more quote unquote agnostic, not to be ironic to the situation, but it's more of that I'm not committed to that. So it was. I guess I'm in that process of trying to.
Agnostic, though? I mean, honestly,
I want to understand it to the best of my ability. So that's the thing I care about.
No, I get that. But do you think that you actually are agnostic on the proposition God exists? I mean, do you actually hold? I mean, do you think to yourself, look, I don't believe either way. I don't believe the P is true, and I don't believe P is false. That's agnostic on P. Again, this is objective. This has nothing to do with my. I mean, this is more than my opinion. You can go validate this. When somebody says in what
I mean, I guess it would definitely depend on what we're defining, because I think anybody could just kind of add an attachment to a God and then
alone on this very channel and on Atheist Edge. There's at least 7 or 8 definitions I can come up with in my just off the top of my head. It is polysemist. Don't argue that Steve says there's only one correct usage. Nonsense. There's many different uses for atheism. I'm saying what is normally best understood in philosophy. If you go read a paper on it, this is how they use it. This is normative. Sure. Right?
So, understanding things like that were even important, but as my understanding goes, my thing is I think it's a mistake with a lot of atheists. Like they want to act like the smartest person in the room. I just genuinely want to know the right answer. So for me,
dude, I love honest interlocutors. You are honest interlocutors, so I love that. But like I said, you don't have to prove. If an atheist says there are no gods, he doesn't have anything to prove. I've never argued there's anything. Anybody has to prove to anybody unless they say, I can prove this to be the case. Then they have what's called a burden of persuasion. If I want to convince you that's the case, is a burden of persuasion is a type of burden of proof. But burden of proof does not mean you have to prove anything. Just like the Big Bang was the bang. The burden of proof, otis probandi, comes from legal terminology. But in epistemology, all it means is your justificatory reasons why you hold a belief to be the case. Okay, whether you have a rational belief or not. That's what the burden of proof is.
Yeah, and so what that comes down to, it's a personal burden of proof. You just have to be able to justify to yourself. Now, if you're going to go out and argue and convince people, then you have to be able to meet their justification, not just your own justification.
Well, I don't know if you have to meet theirs, because they can set it quite high. They have their own. But
if you want them to change their mind.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say that would
but
get into standards of evidence at that point and what somebody might hold over
Yes.
Like the
someone
example I
else's.
give all the time is 0.99 repeating equals 1, right? The reason I use that is because that's an objective mathematical fact, right? There's no ambiguity there. There's no debate to be had, kind of like flat Earth, even more so is mathematics. And so I use it as a litmus test, because if a person doesn't understand that, they have a hard time understanding what objective facts actually are, because that is an objective mathematical fact. So when I say, look, I can prove this, I can prove 0.99 repeating equals 1. I have an onus to demonstrate that if I actually could. If somebody says, well, you know what, you can. You say you can, but you can't, right? Okay, but I can in algebra and in calculus to do it multiple different ways. Even a lot using geometrical progression, I can prove it. But if you just say God does not exist, nobody has the onus to prove that. A theist has no onus to say they can. If they say God exists, they don't have an onus to prove it. Nowhere in philosophy and epistemology does that exist. Nowhere does that exist. They have to prove anything unless they say, I can prove that God exists. Now you can say, oh, you can? Go for it. Yeah, knock yourself out. Let's see what your proof is.
I think you guys blew my fucking mind, so I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for
Hey, you know
calling
what?
in.
Hey,
I'll take it. No,
yeah,
that's
hey,
awesome.
I wanted to say real quick is that fuck Kyle, and I love you guys. So you guys have a good day.
All right, you're the man.
Come
I
back
appreciate
again.
on a serious note, I do appreciate
10,
you guys.
10, we'll do again.
I'm gonna look more into that. If you could like list some links for things that I could possibly read, so that I don't just
In the
necessarily
video
reflect on
description.
the phone.
Yeah,
Cool,
we-
awesome.
Yeah,
That way I
check
can
out Steve's blog.
and all that stuff. Yeah.
sweet.
Yeah,
sweet,
Steve's blog.
that way I can reflect on more than just the call and kind of
Yeah,
dive
because
down into it.
I think if you actually looked into it, you probably are. And again, I'm not trying to label you, but I think you probably are a strong atheist. And I think what it is you just don't think you have the justification for it. There are easy ways to justify strong atheism. So just don't think that you have to prove anything if you say God doesn't exist.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that's right.
I've been doing this a while.
So
I've gotten good at it. Chesh
Yeah,
learned a
that's
lot
why-
too. She's come a long way too. I don't think a year
that's
ago
why
she
most
probably
people
knew any of this
follow
stuff.
you.
Did you, Chesh?
well, that's why most people followed you and not Kyle after the split. So I mean, it's pretty obvious where the knowledge lies.
Yeah. I mean, at this
know,
point, you
I'll
probably
stop
could have swapped sides, to be fair.
Yeah, I'll stop blowing smoke up your guys' asses and
Bud,
let
I
you get
appreciate
some of
that.
their callers. But I'll listen. I appreciate it
All right.
for taking my call.
Thank you.
Thanks for calling
safe.
in.
Chesh,
Yeah,
And,
be
about a
safe,
year
wash
ago,
your
guys.
you probably-
hands.
Wash your hands, socially distant. Chesh, a year ago, so you probably didn't know a lot about this stuff, right?
Who, me? I don't know anything about anything to this day.
I see.
You know what? Fake, just like sex, you can just fake it on a dime, right? Is that?
I don't know shit. I don't know shit about nothing.
Make it up as you go along.
So who
All
we
right,
got?
So who do we got next?
Who's here? Hello.
I'm still here, Mark.
Okay, Mark.
Hello,
All right,
Mark.
Mark, go ahead.
How are you?
Hi. Very well. Fine.
Good.
Long weekend.
Nice.
I
What do you
think
got for us?
I just want to ask about the point that you said. Don't come with definitions, right? Because I think it comes very much down to the definition. Because you make a proposition that says an atheist is this and a theist is this, and depending on what your definition of those two terms is, it could be a dichotomy, couldn't it? I mean, I
Yeah,
have no
granted,
idea about.
arguendo it. Yeah. But like somebody
Correct,
in the
because
live
if-
chat just said.
if-
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Real quick. Somebody
Go
in the
ahead.
live chat just said, he says, in one way you say atheist only has one meaning, and in philosophy, then it says polysemous philosophy. I've never said it has one meaning. Again, this is what people do
Yeah.
when they don't understand. I've never said it only has one
Exactly.
meaning, so that's just completely wrong.
There's a
So
there's a
you
big
said-
difference between saying there is one meaning and I'm using this meaning.
Well,
Saying
what
that
does
there
Mark
is
agree?
only one definition and
Yeah.
saying in this conversation I'm currently using this definition is not saying there is only one definition.
Because I
or
would
what
say
is
we
normal.
would all, yeah, I think we would all agree if we say the definition of a theist is a person that believes in God, and the definition of an atheist is a person that does not believe in God, right?
I
Then we
wouldn't- I
have a
wouldn't use those
dichotomy.
definitions myself. No, I don't use
I
those
know.
definitions. I think they're flawed.
I know. I don't use those definitions either. Don't get me wrong, right? But what I think is an important thing if you sit down and having this discussion is that there are a lot of people that do understand these definitions as the ones they are talking about, right? Because
Okay,
then
granted.
it becomes correct what Matt Dillahunty says when he says
no, it doesn't. That's the argument. It doesn't.
It
make
does.
correct.
Yeah.
Well, hang on. Let me explain why.
no, logically for this
No,
proposition,
it doesn't. And let me
Steve,
explain to
Steve,
you
let him
why it
finish.
doesn't.
Let him say why he
Okay.
thinks he's right,
All right,
and then
why?
we can see why.
That would be cool. Yeah, because look,
Yeah.
if I say preposition A is you do believe in God, and preposition B is an atheist is you don't believe in God, then if at that point, even if you say I'm not sure if it's either this or that, you are not believing in God at that point, right? So therefore, you fall in the atheist category.
And so this is why the category
definition
is flawed. This is why the definition.
No. Let me
And
quickly finish the
let
point.
me- no,
Because
no,
I'm looking at it.
got your-
Just one thing.
Come
One thing.
on.
I'm looking at it from
Don't finish.
Please.
Go
I
ahead.
want to stop you a little bit just because you're going to keep going onto a point and we're going to have to backtrack a bunch. So I just don't want to lose your point as we
Sure.
go.
Go ahead.
Essentially, is that the issue that you're running into?
I love philosophy too, but it's a little different thing, right? So I believe in God and I do not believe in God, or God exists and God doesn't exist, are two very different things, right? That they are vastly different in what they mean and what they say. So I do believe in God or I do not believe in God are two very specific things. If you are not sure if a God exists, by definition, you are not believing in a God.
No, it's not by definition, because the definitions
by logic
are descriptive,
then, right?
No, not by logic definition. Okay, let me explain why this is not the case. Okay. And then
okay,
you
yeah.
Come back on it.
I'm very curious about that.
Awesome. So let me run this by. Let me do it. I think you didn't read my blog on this, but I use something similar to this.
Not yet.
All right. So
I will.
All right. So if I say, if Steve has two daughters and a son, then Steve has a son. Steve has two daughters, therefore he has a son. You would say that's logically valid, right? There's most opponents. Okay.
That is valid. Yes.
Okay. Now, now listen to me carefully here. Okay, this is going to be very critical. You listen. By the way, res instance for 50 Australian. And by the way, he was the one that actually called Matt Dillahunty.
Damn, dude.
Call. So thank you, Rez. And by the way, we invited him to come in if he's not busy. He says, I felt like it. Split this 50-50 or wait, 25-25, lack of sleep, lack of thought process. Also, don't F Kyle. He doesn't deserve it. Cheshire gets a percentage of the super chats. And so she will get a percentage of that. Trust me. And it's pretty fair percentage because I have to pay taxes on it, and I don't short her. I have everything. I like somebody else named Kyle. I actually have records.
We have a system.
Accountings. We have a system.
We have a system.
All right. So. All right. So
Daughter
two daughters,
and
one
son.
son.
So if I say to you, if Steve has two daughters and one son, then Steve has to have at least one son. Steve has two daughters and a son. Therefore, Steve has to have at least one son. Okay. Now, you would agree that follows logically, but is it the case metaphysically that I have to have one son?
No.
Okay, no. So obviously there's a modality there. There's a scope problem there, right? Within the confines of the argument, what's called a relative necessity, it is true that I must have a son, but there's no ontological or metaphysical necessity, which means it must be the case in all possible worlds that I have to have a son. So when Matt Dillahunty says arbitrarily, and this is stipulative, this is arbitrary. He just says not theist equals theist. So in that case, in context to his argument, there's what's called a relative necessity that you must be theist or atheist. Sure, I put that, okay, whatever. But there's no metaphysical necessity.
Okay. Yeah. No,
because it's
we
scope
agree.
difference.
So here's the so the scope difference
the scope
is
problem
what
there?
Yeah. What Phil just said in the chat.
I see
what
that.
Phil just said in the chat. Hold on. What Phil just said in the chat is exactly it. I believe there is a God, and I don't believe there is a God. Does that make sense?
No.
Okay. So.
Well, those are the two options. Either you believe there's a God or you don't. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Or you cannot.
If one person makes that claim, then that is ridiculous.
I will tell you right now, anybody who says this is word salad, you really have no idea what you're talking about. Because I guarantee it, any philosopher that's listening to what I'm saying will be absolutely be able to have a conversation with this, talking about exactly what I'm talking about. This is not word salad. This is what bothers me about people that don't understand the topic. They by fiat say, "Oh, it's word salad," when they don't know enough about the topic to actually analyze it properly. I've had how many philosophers come on my channel that we talk about these things? I assure you, none of them ever said to me ever, not once, "Steve, you're speaking word salad." Ever. Okay, so if you think it's word salad, you're probably in the wrong place because you clearly don't understand the topic. And I would suggest you go read about the topic, because nothing I'm saying is word salad. This is in accordance to basic philosophy, basic reasoning. And I think Mark, right? Was that it?
So
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah.
I
So
think
you would agree
Mark
what I
brought
just
up-
said is philosophical. One sec. You would say you agree what I just said to logically with the modal scope is the case, right? It's not a universal
It is
modality.
absolutely
Okay.
100%. You're
understands.
100% correct, right? So
You know a little logic.
my point when I come,
Right.
yeah, no, absolutely. When I came in, my point was not that Matt Dillahunty is right. Don't get me wrong. He is absolutely wrong. The point I was trying to make is maybe for the audience and people, especially that saying this is word salad, right? Sure, as you just said before, in that one context that he puts it, he is correct. That follows logically, but
As a relative necessity.
yeah, exactly, a relative necessity, but
Mhm.
it's not an absolute necessity, right?
Correct.
What is it?
And that's
called
been my
in
argument, right? You get it. So
yeah, that's
by the way,
and exactly that's the issue. That's the
do
point
you
of the
study
question,
this stuff
right?
because you obviously understand it. So did you study philosophy of logic? Because you seem to know what you're talking about.
As I say, I'm a developer by trade, and I
Okay, so you
love
had to learn some logic
philosophy.
in you.
But I'm a very layman philosopher, right? I've read a lot of philosophy. I'm a Stoic, a very big fan of Stoicism. So
Stoicism, okay.
I get what you are saying, but I also understand the people who never have read anything about this
Yeah,
and are
this
very
is the
confused
argument you
with
got
what
to,
we
yeah.
what we are talking about, right?
I
Because
agree.
So, can I touch on this one a little bit? Because I agree with you.
Yes.
I agree that
Yeah,
there are
go
people
ahead.
who use these terms and talk and it's you're suggesting that it's helpful or useful to cater to people in the way that they're using the terms. But that's what we're doing. We're trying to cater to them in the way they're using their terms and demonstrating how there's there's an error no matter how you define it. Right? So the definitions don't necessarily matter if the category error is still an error. On the other side of that, however, I would like to point out an example why I don't think that's necessarily although I agree with you, I don't think it's a very good argument. I don't think it's a very good argument because do you just let apologists say that evolution is just a theory? No, you correct them in what the term actually means, and what, no matter how you define it, it's still something that is demonstrated. People don't let flat earthers just say that gravity is a theory and you don't know what it is. No, they get corrected and shown that they're wrong. The same thing applies here. Just because you're a layman in something doesn't mean that everybody should cater to whatever usages of the term, particularly when those terms are getting confused and creating additional errors.
oh yeah, I absolutely agree with that. No question there.
Yeah. So you do
I don't
agree,
know.
real quick. You do agree though, if the statement is you must be atheist or theist by metaphysical necessity, if that is what Matt Dillahunty is arguing, he would be wrong, correct?
Oh yeah, 100%,
Okay.
definitely.
And then, by the way, that's going to be hopefully the debate that I have on Friday, because I think that Snake is right, might argue otherwise. He thinks he's wrong. I'm wrong on everything. So, but see, again, Matt strawmans me, right? He doesn't get any of my arguments right. Everything he said about me is wrong. I'm not a prescriptivist. I'm actually a descriptivist. I don't advocate that there's only one correct usage. That's Aaron Ra that does that, not me. Aaron has actually said there's only one correct usage. He said that many times. That's not my argument. And I don't prescribe it to people. You can use any definition you want, but let's talk about what happens if you do. What is an objective fact is that in academia, the most understood uses of atheism is in the positive epistemic status, as a belief that God does not exist. You can read papers on this. Go read it for yourself. That's an objective. It has nothing to do with me or Matt, right? But yeah. Matt and other people from the ACA, they didn't want atheists to know about that. They didn't want atheists to know there was any other way to describe atheism but somebody who doesn't believe. And that is
they've said in their mission statement that they have goals to define as many people as atheists as possible, which is why you end up with them using a term that is so umbrella that it includes agnostic, and why they try to define people into a box so that way they can make their own box bigger than the theist box.
It's an artificial inflation.
Because of a political agenda, which is a valid. That it's like if they're doing that, I can have problems with that, but at least be honest that that's what you're doing.
Yeah, genetically modified skeptic argues that, and he's honest about it, right?
Philosophy. Right. Don't tell people in the
I've never gone
philosophy
after
that they're
James Skeptic
wrong.
otherwise. Yeah.
Right. That's the issue. That's mostly the issue that people have with Matt. He's telling
Oh,
people
no.
that they're wrong when
Right.
they aren't wrong. If he's
Right.
going to say,
Yeah.
"Oh, listen, no, we're not talking about that. We're talking about atheism
Two thumbs up.
specifically," no, there would be no problem. It would be great. Yeah, no problem. But don't walk around and misrepresent people and tell them that they're wrong to try and force them into your box so you can have bigger political numbers.
You're spot on.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's totally spot on. Yeah.
That's very good point. Yes, but
That's my little
so,
rant.
And by the way, that's not a
I will
conspiracy
leave.
theory. Go read David Silverman's book, Fighting God, or Joseph Smith's book, A Case Against God, or go talk to the American Atheists.
Read
I
their
mean,
read
this
their website.
this is what they
That's what it
say. This is
says.
not us
Yeah.
making it up. You know?
No, that is very fine.
Captain
So,
Bristol, the editor-in-chief of American Atheists, has told me this very thing. It is for political reasons, for demographic and voting power, that we define atheism as big as we can. She's like, I don't care about the philosophical aspect. And I even said, well, you're not telling people what's correct because you're saying this is the only way it is, and you know that's not right. And she basically says, yeah, who cares? It doesn't matter. Whatever, the ends justify the means. And I find that to be, if you're going to put yourself out there as the people that hold yourself to higher esteem, a threshold of honesty, and you're fighting against theists that you don't think are being honest, you have to have some kind of higher standard. You can't just say Machiavellian, like, oh, well, yeah, we know it's not quite the case, but you know what? We're not going to worry about that. We're not going to tell people about other usages and just say by fiat, this is the case. That I think is dishonest.
Yeah.
This is why I hold atheists to a higher standard, because I'm a non-theist. They're a non-theist. They need to be more honest about this. So thank you, Jens, for the $2 sticker.
that is
Just
absolutely
like thumbs up.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Just one last thing. I just joined the chat. I tried it a couple of times, but due to time zone changes, difficult. So, but mainly I joined because I saw.
We have time zones.
I'm not an atheist nor theist. Changed my mind, right? And that's why I started in the beginning with that. It is kind of a question of how you define this. If the title of this chat would have been "I'm not an atheist nor theist" in a metaphysical necessity, right? That is wrong. What Dillahunty says.
Yeah, you agree that I'm not, right?
Clear.
I mean, what are you, by the way?
No, that I agree 100%. But
can I ask what your position
because
is? Are you?
I am an atheist. 100%.
Okay, in what sense? You're straight up atheist. Gods don't exist.
Let's say I do not believe God exists, and I'm very certain that gods do not exist, but I would never claim that that no God can exist. Let's say it like this, right? Because
okay, so
I would say the definition of God as a Christian God is impossible by the traits he has, right?
But if
logically
you're certain
impossible.
there are no gods, wait, hang on. Let's parse what you said. If you're certain there are no gods, you are making the claim that gods don't exist. But by the way, that's not the same as saying they're not possible. That's a different claim. So I'm hearing you.
Yes.
And I'm inferring from what you're saying, and I don't want to take you out of context, that you do believe
go,
there are no
go.
gods. So you hold up. You are a strong atheist in that you believe there are no gods, but you hold the what's called the epistemic, or I would say virtue epistemology is open-mindedness to say that, you know what, they could exist. You're not making the argument that they can't exist. By the way, that's a very, very hard argument to try to argue for.
No, that's exactly my position. Yes.
Gotcha.
Because if we argue, for example, about a Christian God, right? I can say I do not. I think that God cannot exist. Given the traits he has, it's a logical impossibility that God specifically exists, right?
Yeah, you're talking about Anselm's God mostly, because the theists don't posit Anselm's God though. Anselm's God has the omni properties, right? Omnibenevolent. So I mean, and evil exists, right? That's the logical problem of evil. We get that.
Correct.
Not many theists posit that type of omnipotence, because that was solved years ago, which was called the principles of eternity, verities, and this was theists that got together and said, hey, you know what, God, if he's all powerful, he should be able to not be. He should not be able to exist, right? If he's all powerful, he can do whatever. And of course, God is positive as a metaphysical necessity, means he must exist in all possible worlds. So they said, okay, there has to be some logical things, and then it became more God's all powerful, all knowing within certain confines of he can only do what is logically possible. So that kind of takes away from that logical evil. But the evidential one's pretty good argument, by the way. So logical problem evil is very narrow in scope and very powerful. The evidential is broader in scope, but I think it's a better way to argue against the gods is evidential, not logical. If that makes sense.
Exactly. And to me, there was
You know
not
these
enough
topics.
evidence shown to claim a belief in God. So I personally do not. I'm happy with anyone who wants to believe it, but don't argue
Okay.
with me that it's a good position to have, right? Or there's any evidence, and then we start arguing the evidence, and then it's a long day and night, and
All right.
no one
So
is happy.
let's wrap this up so we
That's
can
why
have a
I
caller.
tend to like to that's why I tend to like to meet people by their definitions. So if somebody wants to convince me or something, or if I want to convince somebody else of something, then I would want to have it as a one-on-one conversation to be like, okay, well, where are you coming from and what definitions are you using and why are you using those definitions? Now, I might go ahead and explain why these definitions are incorrect or why I think there's an error here. But then
Sure.
the conversation can actually get somewhere rather than just trying to no, it's not that way. No, it's not that. You're not getting anywhere. You're not explaining anything.
Yeah. So
And that's the
Somebody
beauty.
in the chat
Real quick.
also. Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah,
Go ahead.
we've got an interesting thing in the chat that I want to talk about, but we can.
Okay,
switch
one second.
colors
So,
as
Mark, would you agree? Okay, for example, like I said, I'm agnostic, which is neither theist or atheist, as normative in uses in academia and philosophy. Would you say that that is a true statement?
Would agree, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's all that matters. And like I said, anybody can use any kind of stipulated definitions they want. We can get into why some of them lead to absurdities or category errors or special pleading arguments. I have a lot of different arguments out there. But when somebody says by fiat, it is not possible, then they have to have a logical argument for that. And clearly it is possible because I'm neither. So, and I know res instance is neither either. A lot of people are neither because they say, look, these are semantic labels. These are signifiers. They want to hold to agnostic, which is they don't have a position either way. Again, that's objective.
Into either of these categories. Yeah. My belief doesn't
Okay.
fit into either of these categories. Whether or not the statement is true or false is still dichotomous.
Yes. Yeah. The law of school of middle says it's either true or false, right?
Did I just TLDR it? I just TLDR'd it.
Whatever she said, that worked. Yeah. Yeah. We
Yay,
like the
Sash.
TLDRs, don't we? We use it all the time. I say
Sure.
Mark for the call.
Thanks for calling.
No,
That was a really cool conversation.
Was great.
Yeah.
Good luck with your whole court case and whatnot. I mean, looking great.
We'll be talking about
get
that
into
later.
We'll be talking about it soon. All right. Thanks, bud.
I will watch it. See you then. Bye bye.
See ya.
Who we got next, Red?
Radical the
go
Unhollowed
ahead.
Knight
Yeah.
says, here's one for you. Is someone who's never met theists and has no supernatural God beliefs an atheist? Sounds to me atheism is fully reactionary to the theist claims to varying degrees.
Yeah. No, they're not. And again, whatever usages you want to use, but I will give you what like Dr. Oppie uses, right? Dr. Oppie's book, 2017, Atheism and Agnosticism, great book, used to be free. He states that if a person is unaware of the proposition, right, they have no information about that proposition to even evaluate, they're neither atheist nor theist nor agnostic. They're innocent toward that proposition. That's the epistemic status that he uses to designate somebody who's not familiar or has been exposed to the proposition. Because agnosticism requires an evaluation. It says, I've tried to evaluate or attempt to evaluate. So if somebody says, look, I've tried to evaluate this, I just can't. I can't assign it true or false. I'm suspending judgment on it. That's what agnosticism is normatively in philosophy. It is the psychological state of being non-committal on a proposition that you hold to be the agnostic on P, meaning agnostic on P.
Right,
again,
and
does not believe P and does not believe not P. But
And Unhollowed Knight also described essentially babies. They don't know. They can't. Not only are they unaware
They're
of
innocent,
it,
right.
they're innocent or ignorant. So they're unaware
Yes.
of it and also
Both.
are unable to assess the information. Even if you yelled at a baby about hell, they're not gonna be able to comprehend and process
And
that
it's-
information anyway.
yeah, I totally
They
agree.
might
And
cry
and
because
it's
you're
funny,
yelling at them. Maybe don't yell at babies.
you can kick puppies, but don't yell at babies. I actually agree with Dawkins on this, which is unusual. But Dawkins had argued to Cosmic Skeptic, and one of these days I'll get Alex to come back on. We were supposed to have another chat about morality, but he's been busy. But I'll get Cosmic Skeptic to come on and we'll talk about it, because Dawkins had told Alex he believes that we shouldn't call babies or children atheist, for the reasoning is he considers that to be indoctrination, just like saying your child's Catholic. I think Dawkins makes a good argument for that. Now, granted, I don't hold that babies are atheists, regardless, because I think it's silly. I think it's wrong, philosophically speaking. I think it serves no purpose. And there's some huge category issues to be had with that. But other than that, I think it's just on the argument that it's indoctrination, that you're forcing people to use a very specific, limited scope of the terminology based upon what the ACA uses, or American Atheist uses, or Atheist Republic uses. That's not normative in philosophy. That's indoctrination. Now, Alex disagreed with Dawkins, but he just disagreed and said, well, by definition, and that's like, no, there isn't by definition here, because in academia, there is no prescribed definition for atheism. It is polysemous. What is normative, meaning that is what is mostly used, what you ought to use, maybe even if you want to go read a paper on it, is that every time you see the word atheist in a paper, I have never seen it used other than in the positive epistemic status, unless somebody's arguing for negative atheism, like Dr. Michael Martin or Dillahunty.
Can we please, real quick, be like, yeah, but the normative usage in one area within the United States is not necessarily normative around the world, and they should stop acting like it is whenever they engage with anybody?
Oh yeah, I talked to a lot of people around the world, and they hold atheism to be
that would be the polite and reasonable and logical thing to do, is to not assume that everybody uses the same definitions as some guys in Texas do.
Yeah, let me ask this in the live chat.
Just saying.
We'll do a quick straw poll of the audience real quick. So, and then we'll get the next caller in here, or he probably is. But so I'll ask two questions. The first one being is, and this is for the atheist out there. If you are an atheist, are you an atheist that holds atheism to be the positive epistemic status? That is the belief that God does not exist. Or do you do the ACA? If you hold it to be the positive case, press 1. If you hold it to be the negative atheism, or the ACA version, press 2. And that's for the atheist out there. I mean, how you use it. I'm just curious. And then I'll ask the next question after the next caller. If I remember it, I already forgot it, I think. Who do we got next, Bull? You know what? Theists can answer that question too. I don't want to just limit by atheist. How do you use the term
We have
atheist?
no one
One
next.
or two?
No one's
Okay,
one's in. Anybody can come in.
One,
I thought
press
Rez
1
was
if you
coming
hold
in.
it to be the ACA, or 2 if you hold it to be the positive epistemic status. And I hold it to be 2. I'm gonna put that in there. Cheshire, what do you put it in there?
Also 2.
Oh, no, okay. Yeah, I knew that actually. I heard somebody.
Hello? Hello? The doorbell rang.
I heard it.
Hello?
Yo. Is this the Jehovah's Witness again? They're welcome to try too.
Okay, so one
it's Rez.
is...
It's Rez instance.
Yay!
Rez!
Rez, buddy.
Rez!
$2 from
Hello.
Jens. Chest looks good with and without makeup. I know. I use her strictly for her attributes, as people knows this. Whatever. Yeah.
The kinks.
She got all prettied up. She pretty. Go ahead, Rez.
It's almost like somebody called me freaking out while I was still shampooing my hair in the shower.
I literally did. I called her up this morning when she was actually in the shower. I'm talking to her when she's basically bathing. I'm like, I'll wait till you're done, okay? Whatever. All right, Rez, hey, buddy.
I was like ready to yell at him, and I was just like, your timing is impeccable. And he's like, call me. And then I'm like, okay, give me a second. And then I start calling him, and he's like, just a minute. And I'm like, I swear to God.
Hey, look, I showered this morning, and my hair got frizzy. It's super frizzy today. It's like static electricity today. But I tell you what, it smells wonderful. Like lavender and honeysuckle. All right, Rez, buddy.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Why don't you start us off by how this actually came to be? This whole...
I actually don't know.
Well, when you called in the Atheist Experience at one time.
I actually didn't.
I thought that
That
was
wasn't me confusing me with somebody else.
Oh, well, who's this?
This is Rez.
Okay, Rez. I thought it was you that called in. Or didn't you show
No,
me
it
the
wasn't
video?
me.
Oh, somebody else
No.
called in.
Somebody else called in. Wasn't me.
Oh, okay. I'm so confused then.
That's why I was confused.
Yeah. I thought it was maybe because the name on Facebook was Wrecked Instance. I thought it was you. All right, I
Nope.
could be wrong on that. All right, never mind.
I don't use Facebook. I despise Facebook.
Oh, okay, then it wasn't you. I've been all this time. I thought it was you. Live and learn,
Nope.
right?
Look, Steve
Thought
wasn't
I'd clarify
incorrect about
that.
something.
Yeah,
And
Steve
he's
was
accepting
wrong.
his correction.
Hey, you're the first person to prove me wrong, I guess. Yay!
I guess.
You want a cookie? You want a cookie?
I mean, you kind of proved yourself wrong, but
Oh, whatever. All right, so what you got for us, buddy?
not much. I just thought I'd say hi. I apologize for my demeanor because I'm on 5 hours of sleep in 2 days, so I'm kind of exhausted.
That's no bueno.
Yeah, not feeling 100%, but you know, that's how it goes. But so with this whole Matt Dillahunty thing, I mean, the amount of times you guys have been over this very subject over the last few weeks alone, I feel like this being addressed again is kind of redundant. And I'm not saying that to devalue your stream or show. I'm just saying I feel like if people want to know your position on this, they could go to any number of videos in the last few weeks and find out exactly what your
You would
position is
think.
because we've been over this.
Yeah, you would think. I'm
Yeah.
not disagreeing
You
with you,
would
actually.
think.
I'm really not. Yeah, you would think.
You would
but I
think.
posted this the other day on Facebook, though. I still had people arguing about it. And I'm like, are you?
You
are
were
serious?
literally arguing about it yesterday, and I started just answering with, "This is a Steve debacle."
It's a Steve debacle.
But
By the way,
keep
the
in
answer
mind
to
that
that
you
poll
also
was
you
two,
also
mostly.
had somebody on who was getting mad when you were trying to explain and correct this situation.
Oh,
'Cause
Larry.
they just did not understand. That radio guy, yeah.
Larry, the atheist guy. Yeah.
Oh God.
But by the way, the poll was mostly people hold to number 2, which is the position that of atheism as the positive epistemic status. So let me ask another question where I get back to you, Rez. So the next question asked to the audience, do you think that atheism and theism is a metaphysical necessity, meaning that there's no possibility in any way, in any possible world, that you cannot be neither, right? So if you think it's a metaphysical necessity, press 1. If you think it's not a metaphysical necessity, press 2. And by the way, if you think it's a metaphysical necessity, I really hope you can actually prove that. Good luck with that, but let's see.
Press 3 if you're agnostic on the proposition.
Press 3 if you're agnostic. Hey, he gets it. You got it. You've been around a while, Rez. That's why. All right.
Yeah, I've been here. I've been on this channel for fucking how long now? 3 years?
Yeah.
Seems like.
And by the way, this has nothing to do with definitions. This is a metaphysical necessity, which means it has to be the case in all possible worlds, and that's based on classical logic. That's not based on semantics. So
Hey,
this
we
is
got a
classical
3.
Logic. Yeah, I got we got some 3s. All right. Looks like more 2s and everything. So hey, so again, and maybe you know what? I will have a principle of charity. Remember the 5 C's? One of them is charity. Maybe Matt might come out, and by the way, Matt never watches this stuff. But you know, by the way, he will go on other channels and talk mad crap about me. But you know, he doesn't address any of my arguments, and he gets them all wrong. But maybe he'll say, you know, I have not said that it is a metaphysical necessity to be atheist or theist. There are things in philosophy where you can be neither. If he would admit that and say that, I'm done. I'm great. Okay, we're good to go. Move on to other things. Right? That's fair, isn't it?
The issue, well, part of the issue is that a good example is look at the number of people in the chat that we had just at the beginning of this stream who were angry and have now calmed down and are discussing it a little bit more. Even if they continue to disagree with us, there is still a conversation being had in the chat. There's still conversation happening on Facebook. There's still conversation happening on Twitter. These are questions that, 1, we get on a regular basis, 2, that people are interested in, and 3, we haven't let people call in to talk about this before. And I think that's beneficial because it lets them ask questions a little bit more than Steve just explaining his point over and over again, because not everybody understands the way Steve explains things. That's kind of what I'm here for. I understand
myself sometimes, yeah, that's true.
So, like, there's benefits in some ways. I totally understand the topic being exhausting. You have any idea how many times I've heard this topic? Dear God, send help. But there's always new people, and the ACA is going to continue creating new people if they don't adjust their approach, I should say.
So somebody asked a good question, and I don't know if they intended to be a good question or not, but it's a good question because I know this person from my videos. But anyways, they asked, why does X is true in all possible world implies X does not depend on definitions. Possible world semantic only relies on classical verities, right? Classical logic truths, right? So the definitions used in classical logic are things that are descriptive, like the laws of logic, right? The law of non-contradiction, the law of excluded middle, law of identity, right? So those, based upon those, then you can say X must be true in all possible worlds. X cannot be true in any possible world, or it's contingent, which means that it's possible in some and must exist in at least one, but not exist in all of them, right? So contingent versus necessary. Necessary means that exist in all possible worlds. Contingent means that it exists in at least one, but not all of them. And impossible means it cannot exist in any. Those are all based upon the laws of logic and the principles of logic, right? So if you're talking about definitions, yes, then it depends on logical definitions, but not semantic definitions of wordplay, right? We don't care.
None of this makes any of these people bad people.
That has no effect on whether it's a metaphysical necessity or not. None. Metaphysical necessity is based upon the laws of logic.
Can I point out also that none of this makes anybody a good or a bad person, nor does it make them right or wrong about everything all of the time. Just because you think that somebody is incorrect about something here doesn't necessarily mean that you think they're a bad person, or you don't agree with somebody's approach doesn't make them a bad person. It also doesn't make you a bad person for disagreeing with them. Just because we don't appreciate the way that they're necessarily approaching this issue and what they're doing, that's why we're taking action to rectify and educate people more, and why we're not making videos just slandering them.
Yeah, look, I mean, Matt Dillon has done a great job over the years. I'm not.
Yeah, he's done a lot.
Beef against Matt Dillahunty at all. I mean, I really don't. People think that I do. I have no. He's come after me for no reason. I many times. I don't understand why. He came after me on Twitter, and he didn't even talk about the topic. I was talking about multi-value logic, and he was like, "You either believe or you don't believe." I'm like, "Yeah, that's great. So what? That has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Nobody's arguing otherwise." And then he went off a Facebook post that he misconstrued. And he never ever once asked me for clarification. What are the 5 C's again? Clarify. He never bothered to ever clarify my
what's
position.
wrong with the ACA? Wait, did somebody just ask what's wrong with the ACA after like 20 minutes after I did my little rant explaining exactly what the problem was? Rez, this is why we have more than one This is why we have this conversation over and over and over again.
Well, I mean, they might have just come into the stream, but again, we've been over this so
they've been
many
here
times.
the whole time. They've been here the whole time. I've seen them in here the whole time.
Why do some people think that I've never had discussions with Dart Dawkins? I go back with him 6 freaking years. We used to be in hangouts all together, all the time together. Nadia's hangouts and Antonio Fletcher's hangouts and MK's hangouts.
I mean, to be fair, I've tried to forget those
he just won't talk to me because he's scared to death to ever come actually into this channel. He wants to have a platform where you have to go on his terms, where he has moderation control, muting control. I've been there, done that with him. Never again. I decided that years ago. He's dishonest in his locker. He's a dishonest interlocutor. Why bother with him? But he's welcome to come here anytime.
In an ideal world, Rez is right. In an ideal world, we'd be able to make this video, have this conversation 1, maybe 2 times, elaborating or explaining questions. Unfortunately, that's not the case. 1, because YouTube is a very large place, and sometimes older videos do not show up for people, or they're hard to find.
At all.
Secondly, because you have... It's not like we explained how this was wrong and people stopped doing it. I mean incorrect. I don't mean like they're morally wrong. I mean they're incorrect, and we can show that, and as we have today, shown that it's incorrect. But they're gonna keep doing it, which means people are going to keep being confused, and people are going to keep being dogmatic about this. And because people are going to be dogmatic about it, we have to continually correct it. You shouldn't have to correct Kent Hovind more than once, but we never stop seeing videos about him.
Yeah. And by the way, mathematical definitions are not just semantical. Those are prescribed definitions, right? When we're talking about mathematics, there are things that are actually prescribed. It is mathematically prescribed as a prescriptive definition that triangles don't have more than 3 sides. They have a 3-sided equal, something has 3 sides, and all angles, internal angles, add up to 180 degrees on non-Euclidean space, right? So that's something that is prescribed. That is a definition. Just like the definition of rational number means it could be expressed in the form of a ratio of 2 integers where q doesn't equal 0, right? P over q. So these are actually prescribed definitions that people use in mathematics. It doesn't work that way in English, right? There is no really prescribed things what words mean. There are descriptions of how we use words. But in like I said, in academia, there are normative ways of understanding something, just like there is in science. If I say the word theory in science, it's used a very specific way, as in a well-substantiated body of evidence that makes testable predictions and repeatedly accurate accurate predictions, and can be verified repeatedly by experimentation. Okay, that's a description, right? But a younger creationist says, "Oh, theory just means some guess, right?"
Well, how many times are people going to have to explain what evolution is? Godless Scummer for 5 said, "No spoilers, but would it be worth cracking open my bottle of Motorhead dark rum for Registream later?" I'm going to go with yes. And Dapper Dino said, "The Kent Hovind thing may be partially my fault. It's actually Steve's fault because he's the one who brought Kent back to the internet." But on the side note, if you haven't seen If you haven't seen Kent with Bent, I recommend it. It's a fantastic show. Bent Hovind, no relation. He's a great guy, and Dapper Dino's channel is great. So I definitely recommend checking that out if you're interested.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Rez. I agree with you that having this conversation over and over is exhausting, and it kind of plays out, and like we've talked about it before, and it gets repetitive, but not.
But it's fun having Colin to give people a chance to come, right?
Yeah.
Well, again, I don't say that to criticize you guys for doing it. I just find it frustrating as a long-time viewer because we've been over this again and again and again.
Yeah, well,
and I just feel like
Sunday,
there's got to be a better way to address this somehow.
There is
maybe
a different level of understanding.
I can actually agree with you on that. I think there is a better way to handle this. The best way to probably handle this is to have Matt and Steve talk to each other face to face in a conversation, but that's not happening.
That would actually be nice, yes.
That would be nice, but there's one side that's deciding not to do it. It's not like, wouldn't that be great?
And by the way, I'm not looking to have a discussion with Matt, right? But again, I've never heard Matt say, look, in the context Steve uses these terms, if you go to college and you learn about these things or write a paper, yes, he's right. He's never going to admit that. I mean, it's not going to happen, right?
Ideally, the way to address this problem, to actually fix it, would be to have the conversation with the ACA, let the ACA continue to do their thing, but when it comes to philosophy, instead of just telling people no, they're wrong, point them in Steve's direction about philosophy, or point them in the direction of philosophers and say, we don't really cover that here. If you would like to know more, go to these, here are resources, and point them in those directions. That would be the best way to handle it, in my opinion, to actually solve it so we didn't have to have this conversation anymore.
Because have you guys ever noticed Matt has never once ever explained why I'm wrong on anything? He just says by fiat that I am. And when he even talks about my arguments, he strawmans the crap out of them. He never gets them right. But you can't just say, look, Steve's wrong.
I agree with the radical Unhollowed Knight. It can't be on the Atheist Experience show. It would have to be a discussion between the two of them, either something on like modern day debates, something on where neither Matt nor Steve have a mute button. It would have to be something a little more formal.
For it, I wouldn't be against it, but it's not ever going to happen. Why worry about it?
It's not going to happen.
I don't put Matt Dillahunty's name to get views. I get the same amount of views. I've never used somebody's name for views. I hold a particular position. I am adamant on my beliefs, and I've written them down. Literally, have written them down in a blog form. Right? These are something that I'm passionate about. Just like he's an atheist activist. I'm a critical thinker activist. Those Cheshire nowadays, right? She wants people to think, rationally, and she wants people to be critical thinkers. What is the harm with that? It just so happens in this particular case, what Matt puts out, we find, is not accurate, because he's trying to say, hey, look, this is the way it is by fiat because I say so. But have you guys has anybody ever seen him produce a philosophical paper showing that he's right on anything? Of course not. And how many have I shown? Dozens?
It's radical, by the way, not radical. My brain is just not registering words. Lord Loki for 5 says, wish I had read your blog post. You point out the problem with Matt's argument very well. Even a layman should understand this is very easy. Greets Mark. Oh, so that's Mark who called in earlier.
Yeah. And by the way, Mark, look, I appreciate that. My blogs, I write very quickly. I honestly, I have made some mistakes. And by the way, I have somebody who had proofs reading them. Thank you, the Intrigue Feline. She does a wonderful job checking vocabulary, grammar, syntax. Oh, yeah, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But as far as logic, I usually have somebody actually look into it. I mean, I've had Dr. Josh Rasmussen look into it. I've had Dr. Malpass read a couple of my stuff. So I've had Ozzy read some of my stuff. I've had people check my work at least, so I'm not fractally wrong, right? I don't want to be potato wrong. If there's minor errors in it, I accept this, right? I'm no big deal. And if
I know we've got about. Side note, we've got about 5 minutes left, and then we'll be heading over to Red's Rhetoric's channel to do that other stream. So we do have one other caller in here. And I'm not trying to kick you out,
we go
Rez.
a few minutes longer. He's scheduled, I think. But anyway, so
say what you got to say and get the fuck out. We love you.
Love you, bye.
You make a really good point. I agree with Rez. It would be great. I totally agree. And you should be critical to us and let us know if we're covering a topic way too much, because sometimes we get wrapped up in doing whatever we're doing and we forget that, oh yeah, no, I guess we've talked about this like 7 times in the past couple of days.
No, we haven't talked about this on Caffeine Corner. And by the way, we'll get more into my blog on
I just mean on the channel in general. I don't mean like on particular shows. Yeah, but that is another good distinction. Well, yeah, that's another good distinction in between, like, when we talk about something on one show doesn't mean that it doesn't apply to another show somewhere else, which have different audiences. Anyway.
Totally agree. Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, other caller. Hi, who is it? Who's here?
Hello. Hey, Steve, this is Mike again. Hey, Josh.
What's up,
Hello.
Okay, we don't have 5 hours, so do it to you.
No, I know, but I kind of broke it down, right? The 2 things that I wanted to bring up, right? Which were the idea of how do you logically index somebody that's in the midst of a conversion from atheism to theism or theism to atheism, and so the reason I bring that up is because the idea that the next thing I was going to bring up was the idea of being both atheist and theist because the referent is not disambiguated, right? Meaning your idea of what the God is becomes
because I know you can. Look, hang on. You can ask brilliant questions. But let's talk about one at a time because if not, you're going to go on forever, and I know that because I've known you for 6 years.
Okay.
All right, so let's talk about that disambiguation because I think you have a point there, and you usually do. You're just very long-winded at it, but you know your stuff inside and out. I'm always going to grant that with you. All right, so let's hear me out, and then you can evaluate that.
Okay.
First of all, I think that when we use classical logic for things like beliefs, we are shoehorning things, right? I mean, I think that it is not really what we should be using to really discuss beliefs. I think we should use epistemic logic or dysastic logic. Would you agree?
I do agree.
Okay. So using those things, let's say there's a lot of different types of logic, right? Paraconsistent logic, intuitionist logic. Each one has its own rules, right? Paraconsistent logic doesn't have law of excluded middle, law of non-contradiction. The intuitionist logic, not P doesn't meet equal P, so double negation doesn't exist. So when we start talking about other types of logic, we have a lot more nuance, right? So when you're talking about people that have weird things that maybe, like that transition that you have brought up, there might be ways to describe this, and I have in my blog kind of brought this up about what it would mean to be either in a diatheistic type state or in a state of, is there something to be said for being both atheist and theist at the same time based upon certain usages, which you've read my blog on that. Somebody who defines atheism in the weak case then that leads to a problem because a theist can just say, look, anybody who doesn't believe the negation of the proposition that gods do not exist is now a theist. If you don't grant them that is a special pleading argument, correct?
Well, like I grant over everything that you're saying, and yet at the same time, when I'm questioning the referent, it would be kind of the idea of people saying, well, Jesus is an alien, right? And so I'm a Christian because I believe Jesus is an alien. And then other people would say, no, Jesus is not an alien in the same way that we're referencing aliens. And so it would be kind of, so I was just wondering whether or not, because when I'm trying to format my formal logic, I'm putting in a C category for consideration that kind of underscores the B code. The B has, even though I know you're using modal logic and you're using A and T, theist and atheist in your, below this video.
Okay, yeah. Did I get the logic right? You know about logic a little bit. Did I get the modal logic right?
Yeah, I mean, everything you're laying out seems fine. I'm trying to add another category, a prefixed category that would adjust where people lay within that.
Yeah, if you're in the if you're moving from one position to the other side, like so, if you're on this side of the equation and you're currently moving to the other side of the equation, what would you how would you be categorized? What would you call yourself in that case?
Transitional.
And I think the answer would be neither, would it not? Transitioning.
Well, for me, I'm trying to get a both category at the same time, and the reason I say that is because if I disambiguate the idea between Jesus is an alien, Jesus is not an alien, but something, more orthodox, let's say, then, and if I'm making a transition from one to the other, then that's different than a type of negation of theism altogether. But it's trying to disambiguate what the referent is. And so to me, that's an important dialogue to have, but that one would be a much more lengthy, and I know you guys are trying to wrap it up, but that's why I wanted to throw those two ideas out to just kind of present it.
So I think what we should do is we should sit on this, because you were planning on having a more Ask a Philosopher type call about this and kind of what we were talking about. I feel like we should just invite our lovely guest here to come on to an Ask a Philosopher and do a larger segment on something like this.
Yeah, it's very. I just find you guys when I find you guys live, and then I chime in.
Yeah. He won't go anywhere. The problem, I love Michael, but he's a wordsmith, and we're the too long didn't read kind of people, and he can,
I like both,
forever.
I like
so
both.
I mean, but he knows I can't respond to everything he writes because it's too bombastic, and I know, but I'm not saying. By the way, I'm not disagreeing with him. We probably agree on 90% of everything. It's just that it's very hot. He's very, very flowery in his language, and I'm not saying that he's wrong when he uses the terms. It's just more than I can read in one sitting, and I think he realizes.
Well, that's why I feel like it would be really good to bring. It would be really good to bring somebody on for do an Ask a Philosopher, and then bring him on, and then have that as more of a discussion. I think that would be a good, and that should be its own show, quite frankly.
Now, Michael, you vacillated back and forth.
Could be a really interesting
Sorry.
I think that'd be a really interesting, lengthy discussion, but we should wrap it up because we're supposed to be on another stream right now.
Well, right on, guys. Have a good one.
So,
thanks
Mike,
for your time.
Right now, wait, what's your position now on God? I'm just curious.
I still hold. Well, I'm a theist, but I'm not a classical theist, and that's why I make those disambiguations and
But you believe there was some kind of God. You're a non-classical theist.
Yeah, I would say I'm a non-classical theist.
All right, that works for me, bud.
Right on.
Thanks.
It's nice hearing from you.
Yeah, thanks, bud.
Bull,
there's nobody else. Yep, there's nobody else in the comment. Or the,
no,
call, right?
No, there's no one else in the call.
So we'll cut it off there, I guess. That's fine. Anyways, to wrap it up, guys. Yeah, and look, I like these call-in things. We're probably going to do more often on different subjects. But the reason I want to do this one is, again, when I write a blog, I like talking about it. We'll be talking about the blog itself. We'll break it down on a philosophical episode, probably with Nick Suter or some him or other people. But I want people to recognize this is not just us talking out our a-holes. This is actually what should be discussed when we're talking about these topics. They're not to be.
I'm just talking out of my ass. I don't
know. But people dismiss them so arbitrarily, like, oh wait, bad argument. Okay, explain why. If you can't explain to me why an argument's bad, then you probably at best should remain agnostic on that argument. Because look, if I don't know an argument, I say I have. Like, for example, the other day when I had listened to Dr. Malpass and William and Craig, I didn't understand what the beef was, right? But you know what I did? I asked Alex Malpass, Dr. Malpass, to clarify. I said, can you explain to me what the real contention was? And he did. And then I wrote in a blog what I felt was the best way to describe to somebody what they were getting at. Now, do I think it was perfect? No, I guess it was like 80% there. I guess I should have added some other things. But I had Malpass read it over, and he was like, yeah, that's just basically it.
Well, and people shouldn't be angry at you for asking somebody to explain something. Now, if somebody's short with you, there's a difference between somebody being short with you and being like, listen, I don't have time to have this conversation every single time. Go look here. Go watch this. That's acceptable in that case when you're asking somebody else for that kind of information. But if somebody says something and you say, hey, can you clarify this? And they say, oh, okay, I don't have time to clarify this every single time. However, here are these sources, here's this, this, and this, and then they can explain that to you. That's fine. Or they can get back to you later. which is unlike what we usually talk about on the show, which is when you ask a question and people get mad at you that you even question them in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. How can I question the great Matt Dillahunty, right? Well, I mean, look, again, I'll predict there'll probably be people in the comment section saying, "Steve, you're wrong," and either they haven't read the blog, they don't understand the argument, or they just assert it by fiat and they don't show me any logical argument. Because people need to, by the way, stop using that. Argumentum ad vericandium is not a logical fallacy if the person's an expert has evaluated the work. That is not a logical fallacy. That's called a citation if it supports your argument. It is only, not to say only. If I would say I am right because an expert says I'm right, that is a fallacy. I've never done that. Stop throwing out fallacies when you don't have an actual argument rejoinder to the argument. It makes you look silly. And I've seen Matt Dillahunty do that as well. He actually says, well, Steve appeals to authority, which is fallacious. Well, no, it's not, Matt. It's called a legit appeal to authority, argumentum ad vericandium, which is a legit citation by an actual expert to support your arguments. Right?
Yeah, it's the same as when Matt says that the majority of biologists have done the research on this and they're correct, and I'm citing those biologists about evolution. Okay. It's the same thing. It's just about philosophy. That's not like if Matt Dillahunty is not committing the fallacy when he does that, then Steve is not committing the fallacy if he's doing this, because they're doing the same thing, just different topics.
All right, guys, we're gonna head over to Res Rhetoric's stream.
Here's the link. See you soon.
Link in the video description. Big shout out, real quick. We got 2 minutes. I want to thank Moni out there. She's a member. I want to thank Ronnie. 1970 for being very supportive of this channel. Rez, another $5. I'm not a pessimist, just a disappointed optimist. I agree. I'm there too. But I want to thank all the members that are supportive of this channel, all the people that have been Patreon. Again, we will be providing a lot more content. So I'm working on many different things. I got Dr. Jonathan Ratz coming in. I think he's a doctor.
We're always working on content.
Yeah, I think he's a doctor. I'm pretty sure that he is. But I got him coming on Thursday. Is Ratz a doctor? I know he studied philosophy, but I don't know if he's got a PhD. I don't know.
We'll ask him when he gets here.
Yeah, we'll figure it out, right? But yeah, we do work behind the scenes to provide this kind of content for philosophy and science. And then we got some, like I said, we got some big news coming up in the Rhetorics channel. Head over there. But I really do want to thank the people that have been very supportive to me, that have actually looked at the arguments rather than just by fiat saying that I'm wrong, or that have, goes out of the way to try to character assassinate me rather than actually
at least if you think he's still wrong for whatever reason, you don't need to be a dick about it.
Yeah, because that's one thing about Matt Dillahunty I don't get. He's actually tried to character assassinate me merely because it was really, really bad. Even people that agreed with him told him it was bad. And I wrote a response to it. So you can go read that on my blog.
Steve, anyways, for fuck's sake, end the show.
Gotta go, God. God says. All right, go to Res Rhetorics channel. Peace.